Hi guys, and welcome to this content localizer training. So from the term content localizer, you can probably gather that this is all about ranking on a localized basis, okay, and what you need to do to ensure that you do that in a meaningful way. So one of the things that I want to cover is the on-page factors here and how they've changed. So unless you've been living under a rock, you're going to realize that Google now needs topical relevance, okay, rather than just keywords peppered on a page. Their AI now has rolled out to such a degree that Google now is pretty good at understanding what's on a page and what it refers to if it's been built properly and if the correct content is on the page. Now Google can't actually read, it's a machine at the end of the day, so they're not actually reading the content. But what they can do is they can scan the page and they can look at the terms and phrases and the way that we connect those terms and phrases, how certain terms and phrases co-occur in order to make some assumptions about what they believe our content is about. And they have within their knowledge graph some serious data, okay, which then they can match against what they've crawled on our page and see how we're faring on a topical basis. How does our page measure up to the competition in terms of providing the information that an individual might be searching for? So there's two main elements to this, okay, when somebody's doing a search. There's two key things that Google is going to sort of draw inferences from. One is the intent of the search. Okay, so by that we mean, is that person looking for information? Are they trying to navigate directly to a site? Are they trying to buy something? Are they trying to get some information because they may be making a purchasing decision in the future? Okay, so all of this is going to change the way that we would want to organize our page according to what we believe the intent of the search is going to be. So in other words, if you're trying to sell a pest control service, you don't want to be doing necessarily a how to get rid of ants at home on your own DIY kind of video. Okay, because there's two reasons for that. One is, of course, that the intent will be wrong. Okay, so if somebody's looking for a how-to video, they're not looking for someone to come and do the job. And also, why would you be trying to tell someone how to do what the very service that you provide? Okay, so we have to consider intent on each individualized page and look at who are we trying to attract to that page, and is our page set up in such a way that Google is going to reward us when those particular types of searches are typed into Google. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing, of course, is the actual relevance of the subject matter. So at the end of the day, the content that we put on the page, how relevant is it to the search query? Now, there are two elements. When we're looking at local, there are two elements to a search query, okay? One is kind of implied or inferred. The other one is more explicit. So the explicit one is what the person actually types into the search bar. Okay, so right now I'm going to pause for a second and I'm going to head on over to Google Search, because this is one of those situations where it's a lot easier to actually tell you, rather it's a lot easier to show you than it is to explain to you. Okay, so here we are at search. So let's have a look for example, how to get rid of ants. Okay, I'll use that one because I used to be in the pest control industry, so it's an easy one for me to hopefully know what I'm doing. And the first thing that we're going to do is look at these tabs across the top. Okay, so for this particular search query, okay, what does Google deem as being the most relevant type of content? Now these tabs are giving you a clue. Videos is the first thing that we see. After all, the first thing we see are videos. So this is giving us a clue that this is informational. Okay, this particular query has informational intent because Google is serving up videos. Now the other thing is, the second tab is shopping. So what the assumption that Google are making from this query is, first of all, I want to do this on my own. Okay, I'm not looking for a pest control service, because we can see maps doesn't even feature along here. Okay, I mean, there likely is not a map on this page, right? And indeed there isn't. Okay, so there's no local map. Now I've got my geo set to Perth, and believe me, we have a lot of pest problems here in Perth. Okay, and yet Google has looked at that search query and it said, that person is not interested in actually hiring someone to come and do this. They're looking to do this themselves. So the first thing they're going to want is some information on how you do it, which they get from a video. And the second thing they might need is a product. Okay, so if we click on shopping, we'll find here are some products here that might help us get rid of ants. Okay, so Google understands from that query that we're looking to do this ourselves. Okay, we're not looking to hire someone. So it doesn't serve up any maps pages, and it's not serving up. I mean, here there's somebody advertising for it. This is so companies may well advertise for this because they're trying to convince you not to do it yourself. But this is a separate thing. Okay, because this is a conscious decision on the part of the advertiser to want to show their advert. Okay, so this is a different thing. So I always ignore the ads. These don't tell you anything. Okay, but by looking at the tabs and by looking at the actual content on the page. So what's the first thing we see? Well, it's a snippet, and it's a snippet that's telling us somebody's probably used some schema on here to mark up their directions on how you actually get rid of ants. Okay. I just know from having been in the pest control industry, good luck with trying this. Anyway, that's another story. If we scroll down, we get some videos, okay, on Google, which is, exactly what we'd expect to see, given that videos was the first tab that we saw after all. And then we get some web pages, okay, and these web pages are clearly pages which these might be on pest control companies quite possibly, but what they've done is they've thought, oh, this is a real estate company, so here you go. But some of these might have actually, they may possibly be, actually most of these aren't pest control businesses. This one may be. This one is clearly down here. So these pest control companies that have a page dedicated to this, what they're thinking is they're probably doing a page, and then on that page they're also going to convince you that it's not worth trying to do it yourself. Okay, which is a good strategy. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But what they've done is they've clearly organized these pages so that they are relevant for for the intent of that query. Okay. Now let's look at this. Let's look at a different. Let's try this one. Let's see what Google makes of this. Okay, well, first of all, there's more ads, there's more people. So they're still looking at this as that I want to do it myself. Okay. So let's try ant treatments. Right, so now again we've got products. We can see shopping's the first thing. So again, Google believes that we want to do this ourselves still. Okay, images next, and these images will all be of products like these, no doubt. Yep. Okay, so they're showing the products at the top, and then they're showing some images of pests. And again, there's more images there, or more buttons to buy these products. Okay, so Google is making the assumption here, if we just type in ant treatments, that we still want to do it ourselves. What about if we put best deal? Best deal on ant treatments. Okay, Google still thinks that we want to do it ourselves. Okay. Oh, now let's think about something else. Let's go ant treatments in, I'm going to choose a suburb in Mindari. So I've now localized it. Right, now you'll see straight away, because I've put some local intent in there, the assumption Google's made is, well, it doesn't make sense for me to add my location if I'm looking to do it myself, because the location isn't really relevant. I mean, it might be to some degree if I'm trying to find a store, I guess, that sells the products, but that's not how they're viewing this. They're clearly, they're serving up all of these pest control companies now. All right, still no map, which is interesting. Okay, so this is obviously something where there's, they're not 100% sure. Best ant treatments in Mindari. Okay, now we've got one flare, high pages, yellow pages. So all the directories are coming up now. So Google totally understands now that we're looking for a service. Okay, interestingly, still not showing a map, which I'm kind of surprised at. But okay, so let's have a look for, let's change that to pest. Let's make it more general. Okay, so again, Google understands here that we're looking for a service, but yet they're still not showing a map, which is, I actually find strange. I mean, they've got maps as the second tab, so they clearly get it that this is a local search. So I'm a bit surprised that they haven't shown a map in that page, but there you go. This just goes to show what Google can be like. If I then just change to pest control in Mindari, surely they're going to show me a map for that. Okay, so now they totally get it. They're showing a map. I'm surprised they didn't on those other ones. So what they're doing now is they're showing me some businesses which are located close to this suburb. Okay, so what I've done here is I could be looking from work. Say for example, what I've done here is I've set my location to Perth. So this will just take the sort of Perth CBD, the central business district. So I could be looking from work. So I put in, I don't want pest control done at my workplace. I want it done at my home in Mindari. So I've added that. And then Google will serve me up results based on my geo modification that I put in there. But I could equally do this. I could, let's say I'm in Mindari in my home, and I just put pest control now. Okay, Google is still going to serve up a map, slightly different results, because it is a different query, because I haven't added the geolocation in the intent of the query. But Google are drawing that inference or assumption, if you like, from the data that my device is providing here. Okay, so that's how. So the geolocation, once we start looking at these sorts of terms that are very local, like I'm clearly looking for a pest control company, the geo matters then. Google kicks in and says, right, okay, where you're located now matters, because somebody can't service you from the other side of the world for a pest control treatment. Whereas they could potentially sell you a how-to guide, and they could potentially sell you a product from the other side of the world. Okay, so the local is not a factor when we're dealing with the how-to or the product pages so much. Okay, so what we've learned so far is that intent's really important. Okay, we've got either transactional intent, which in this case we're kind of inferring to Google this is transactional, because we're looking to probably hire a pest controller to come and do some work on our home very soon. Or there's some kind of commercial intent, i.e. let's say it might be a termite barrier. We're not necessarily looking to have that done tomorrow, but it's something that we're considering having done, and we just want to get some prices and some ideas of what it's going to cost. So there's some commercial intent there. Or it's a how-to. How do I do this myself? I've got ants. I don't want to call out a professional, can't afford it, don't trust them, whatever the reason. Want to do this myself. So that's a how-to. Okay, so that's informational intent. So that's the first thing on our page. We need to look at the intent of the query, and then we need to look at how we're going to cover the topic satisfactorily, so that it satisfies both the intent and it satisfies the search query, like the actual subject matter of the query. Now, one of the things that's missed a lot of the time with this is the geo portion. Okay, so how do you actually optimize for this part? Okay, now it's much easier with regard to our GMB, because a GMB is verified at a specific location. Okay, so when you receive a postcard, or if you're lucky enough to get phone verification, what's happened there is that Google have had verification, right? Let's take the example of a postcard. You apply for a GMB, Google sends you a postcard in the mail, you receive it at that address, and you verify the listing. Okay, so what you've just done to Google is you've told Google, I've received the card at the address that I gave you, I've entered the verification code, therefore this is where I am, this is where I'm located. Okay, so you verified to Google the location of your business. Now, this is one of the reasons that I suggest to anybody that you should, if you're working in local, even if you don't want to rely on the traffic that you get from a GMB, excuse me, you should absolutely be verifying one, because it's a point of verification for the whole entity structure, not just your GMB, but the website that's linked to it. And if you start doing schema and such like on your website, you can call out to that GMB. There's so much you can do to tie those two elements together so that you get the benefit of the validation of the location from the GMB. So that's one way that we can help on our website to actually convince Google where we're located. But you might have a website which has lots of location pages, and you may not have a GMB for each of those locations. So we need to go a little bit further with our on-page in terms of convincing Google that we operate in that place, or at least that the page is relevant for that particular area. So this works in the same way as niche relevance does. Okay, it's really no different. And in the past, just mentioning the name of the place, like if we had a page in, let's say it was Mindari, this particular suburb here, we might have our title as pest control in Mindari. Then we might say, eco-friendly pest control has been operating from Mindari for the last 14 years. We service Mindari and surrounding areas. But so you've mentioned Mindari 3, 4, 5 times. Okay, that really isn't enough anymore. It's not going to. Google's going to look at that and say, well, okay, you've mentioned that suburb 3, 4, 5 times, but there's no context. Okay, it's not. It's not really telling them anything. It helps for sure, but it's not enough anymore. What we need to be doing now is actually adding some context by adding some geo content about that particular place. Okay, we need to be giving Google more information, just in the same way that the topics work for niche. Like, for example, if you wanted to adequately cover the subject of ant control on a page, it's not good enough just to put ant treatment, ant control, ant extermination, ant control, ant treatment, ant extermination, and repeat those keywords 4 or 5 times throughout the page and pepper that throughout some other content. Google's going to look at that, and you can test this yourself if you want to use Google's API, NLP API, and you'll see that you're not covering the content, you're not covering the topic. As far as Google are concerned, you are simply not covering the topic. Okay, well, the same applies to geo. Okay, we need to cover the topic, so we need to give Google more context. So to that end, what we've done is we've actually created some software. But I want to add a bit more value to this training for you, because I'm not here just to simply sell you some software, and there's no obligation, of course, to buy the software. This training is free. You can use the training to improve your on-page results. One of the other things that I'm going to show you, I've showed you the tabs, so this is a good way. Like, I've given you a little bit of info on the intent, shown you that you can use these tabs across here to get a good idea of what Google deems as being most relevant for a particular query. So for example, let's put pest control service in here, because that is an actual category. That's a category within Google My Business. Okay, so let's search for that. Okay, and what we see, this hasn't changed. What we see is that maps is what they deem as most important. Okay, now that obviously doesn't include organics within the all, but outside of organics. So these are things that kind of live within Google's own ecosphere, if you like, if you want to call it that. So let's have a look down. We're looking at maps first. That's the first thing underneath the adverts that appears on the page. No surprise, given that they're telling us there that maps are so important. If we scroll down, there may be some images on this page, probably not. Usually the first page with something as competitive as pest control is just taken up with maps and organic results. Okay, and you may have to go down a few pages before you start seeing any images. But Google have said maps is first, most important for that query, then images. Okay, let's click on images and have a look, and we can see these are images mostly of pest control companies. Okay, so what Google is also telling you here, by looking at the actual content, they're saying images are second most important, and within the images, the most important images are those of pest control companies, because there is commercial intent, transactional intent behind that query. Okay, so it's no surprise that they're showing images of pest control companies that offer that service rather than just images of pests or images of products that get rid of pests. Okay, you get the idea? And then we go over to shopping, then it'll be products. Okay, so now this is interesting. So the top one here is this pest repellent. Okay, so even within the products and how they arrange the hierarchy, they can see you're not looking to do this yourself still. So it's like, well, yes, you're going to buy a product, but it's not a pest control product. Well, it is a pest control product of sorts, but it's not a product where you're doing the service yourself at home DIY. This is a device to get rid of repellents. These also don't work, by the way, but that's a side issue. But that's this is how Google are perceiving this as being, okay, this is something you just plug in the wall. There's no work attached to doing this. All right. And then we finally get down to some products and equipment if you want to actually do it yourself. Okay. So you get the idea. Okay. And then if we go into more, it's videos. So now these would probably be, right. So you can see again, these are videos. The top videos here are videos that are from actual pest control companies. So these are not how-to videos. Okay, these are kind of advertisements, if you like. These are videos that have been done by the pest control companies to advertise their services. So this is clearly Google telling you what the intent is behind that query. Okay. The other thing that we can look at in order to have a good idea of what sort of content we want to put together is Google Trends. Okay, now what Google Trends is going to do for us is it's going to tell us whether a particular term, a search term that we're looking for, whether that search term is purely just a search term or whether it is an entity in its own right. So if we choose pest control as an example, right, we can see that pest control exists as a search term. Okay. Now, pest control with a capital P, okay, I'm not going to go into the why it's got a capital P and why that's important. We do go into that a little bit in our courses. But suffice to say that these are different. Okay, so this is a search term, so same term, but this is a search term. This is organizational type. So what Google's telling you here is that pest control is a type of company. Okay, so they're not even here referring to the process of controlling pests. They're talking about pest control as an organization, as a company. Okay, and then we've got an actual example of two here, which exists as topics. So Rent-A-Kill, which of course are one of the largest in the world, if not the largest, and Cooks. Okay, so these, and if we scroll down, There's another one there and another one. And again, this is part of Rollins, massive company. Okay, so if we look at this, it's telling us quite a bit here. It exists as a search term, it exists as an organizational type, and here are 4 examples of those organizations that exist as pest control companies. Okay, so these are all entities, and if we click on one of these, if we click on that, we're not going to see any machine code. If we click on this, for example, okay, we're going to see up here that in the query we've got this number here. All right, now this %2f is just a slash. Okay, so this is actually, I'll change it so that it's easier to read. Okay, and then I'll highlight it. So that there highlighted in blue is the actual machine code for that entity, pest control as an organizational type. Okay, if we go back again, and I'll do the same search again, and this time we're going to click on the search term. Okay, you can see the query is just pest control. Okay, in text. Okay, it's just the search term. Okay, and the results will be different too for both, depending on what it is. So this is a good way to find what actual search terms are entities or topics. You can use those almost interchangeably. Okay, topics are entities. Not all entities are topics. Okay, but by doing this, by doing these searches, if we look for another one, let's look at ant control. I'm pretty sure that is not. Okay, so you can see that's just the search term. Okay, so if we were doing a page for ant control, we would need to really include the term pest control within that page, okay, in order to give it more context to Google, because ant control is only a search term, it's only a keyword. Okay, so it exists within a bigger, think of it like folders and files, really. If you know, you can think that ant control is a file that exists within the bigger folder of pest control. Okay, it falls within it. So what we're making sure we do when we do our content on page is that we're finding out what the actual what are the ones that are topics, so that we're getting the bigger picture and covering the broader picture. Okay, and then what we could do is we could do sub pages that go into more detail. So for example, we would have ant control on a page and cover that to some degree within pest control, and then we might have a page that went into a lot of detail specifically about that particular subject of ant control, and they would interlink. Okay, so that gives you a good idea of how to set that up. But always remember, when you're doing when you're setting up your page, that you want to ensure that you get your search intent well thought out. Who are you trying to attract to the page? What's the intent of the person who's going to be wanting to come to your page and consume the content? And make sure that you align your content with that search intent so that Google sees it as a good match. So it's not just it's not just the subject that you cover, it's the intent behind the content in terms of when it's searched. You know, what are people looking for? So don't do a how-to page and then expect people that are looking for a service, don't expect that page to rank. It's not going to. Okay, even it doesn't matter how well you've covered that subject and that topic, it's not going to rank for that particular search query because the intent is wrong. Okay, so with that, let me introduce you to Content Localizer, the tool, because the one thing that this is going to do for you is make it one heck of a lot easier for you to add your geo content to your page. Okay, here we are at the dash of Content Localizer, and as you can see, it's really simple, which is good. I love to keep things nice and simple because it's the way that I work best, and it's really probably the best way to go, really, in terms of just keeping the learning curve as small as possible. Now, the learning curve with this particular software is probably all of about 2 minutes. Okay, it's really that simple to use. The first thing that we're going to do is add our city. Okay, so I'm going to look for, let's do one for Lloyd's business. So Liverpool, and we just save that. Okay, I can add more, I just want to add just one for now. And then we're going to add a proxy in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is go and grab some proxy details. Okay, just bear with me, guys. So we add the IP, we add the port, which is here. And then finally we want the user. Okay, and then we save that. So again, you can add as many proxies as you want. Okay, I'm only going to do one here just to demonstrate. So then what we're doing is we select the cities that we want to scrape for. Piece of advice, don't scrape for tons and tons at one time, okay, because it's you're more likely to have issues with failures and things. Best to keep it to, you know, smaller scrapes and make sure they're going to be more accurate and consistent. Okay, so it's like anything, and the good thing is once you've scraped that content, you've got it. Okay, so you haven't got to scrape for that city again. We then just simply press submit. Okay, now this is normally only takes about a minute. I'm just going to pause till it's finished. Actually, I forgot to show you this feature, so I'm going to do this. Let's just name this the same as Lloyd's, and we're going to submit again. Okay, just pause a second and I'll come back to you. Okay, so that took about a minute and it's pulled that information, downloaded successfully, it says. So let me show you here. What I've done here is I've added the business name of the business that we're scraping the data for. Okay, so now let's just go over to, I'll go to documents, and output should be here. So I think it's going to be this one. Okay, so we can see here what we've got in this file. We've got up here targeted SEO services Liverpool, targeted SEO services Liverpool and surrounding areas, right? So whatever the business name is. This is just to add a bit of context for the actual business. You don't have to add this, okay? You can leave it out and it will just leave it blank. But if you do, it's going to pull a bit of context for the business itself into the city. Okay, then what we get is a phrase or two about the city itself. Okay, now what we don't do is pull any data other than the basic data which pertains to the location of the place and its most significant content about it that Google finds. Okay, so it doesn't want to go into things like the history of the city, demographics too much and things like that, because once we start going deep into and this is an important thing, actually, I'll stress this in case there's a temptation to add even more information. If we go too deep with regard to our topic on the actual location, Google can start to believe that the page is specifically about that subject. Okay, so not that we're just covering that topic as well because it's a factor. So when we're building a page out, if our page is for example, pest control in Liverpool, okay, we are going to want to have the bulk of our content on pest control and then this piece on the actual place. Okay, and then what it does is it just adds the location contextually to the content so that Google gets, okay, yeah, this pertains to that location. Now, if we ended up adding too much information, if we scrape tons and tons of information about Liverpool, Google may look at that page and actually think, this page is about Liverpool. It's not about pest control. So we've got to be careful that we don't overstep the mark and give Google too much, because if we give them too much, we can actually skew the result in terms of we can end up ranking for the term Liverpool rather than ranking for any of our pest control terms. The other thing that it's going to scrape here where it's available, and I say that because not every city, this is just Google, how they present their data. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about this, guys. Not every single city in the world is going to have postal code data or zip code data. Okay, Google doesn't always present it, and if they don't, then we can't scrape it. But where it does, where it is presented, we will pull for you a huge list of all the postal codes that pertain to that city. Okay, now these can be very useful when you're doing your own page, again for adding relevance so that Google understands that you service all these postal districts. So there are specific strategies that people use with postal codes. I'm not an expert on how to use these. You may have ideas on how you would want to use these. They're there for you if you do. Okay, so that's the tool, guys. There really isn't anything else to explain on it. It's that simple to use. You simply input the city that you want to scrape, and you have your proxies in there, and you press go. And as I said before, you can add, if you wish, the business name so that it adds some context up here to the geo content. That's entirely up to you. Okay, so that's it. There'll be a link to where you can purchase this. It's a very, very reasonable price. We've priced it so that anyone can really afford to have it. It's going to make your job really easy of making your pages geo specific. Okay, it's going to take the sting out of it for you, because if you actually have to go out and copy and paste all this, a lot of this info comes from Wikipedia. You'll find if you go into Wiki and try and copy it, you're going to have tons of links in there. You're going to have the tags and everything to get rid of. It's a real pain. So this is just makes it nice and easy for you to actually grab this information and grab it really quickly.